So a bit of a follow-up here with the Steam Machine situation, as Valve did actually kind of respond when it comes to the price point around it. And we got our first real look at the motherboard inside, which has now brought up a whole bunch of other questions. If you're someone who's thinking about buying the Steam Machine, and certainly something you should be aware of. So we'll look at that, as well as some of the fears around next generation for Sony and Microsoft, and why the Steam Machine won't necessarily be as reflective for the market just based on Valve's approach to the whole thing. And we'll look at that and more. So if you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. First, though, I want to give a shout out to this video sponsor. That's Maono with their PD200W hybrid microphone. What makes this microphone stand out is that it gives you 3 different ways to use it. You can either run it completely wireless over 2.4 gigahertz if you want a super clean setup, plug it directly into your PC or phone over USB, or hook it up through XLR if you've already got an interface or mixer setup. So whether you're doing a quick voiceover, streaming, podcasting, or a more serious studio setup, it adapts pretty easily. Getting rid of extra cable clutter on the desk is really welcomed, especially if you move cameras around a lot or record in different spots. And the wireless mode is actually really convenient. And the cool part is it still sounds like a proper dynamic mic. It's using a 30mm dynamic capsule with cardioid pickup, and it's got 3 levels of built-in noise reduction. This is particularly useful for someone like me who has an AC unit a few feet from their recording area because I'm very smart. So take a listen. If you want to hear more of how this mic sounds, I'm going to be recording this entire video today using it, so turn up the volume and have a listen. Content creators will appreciate the dual track recording support. If you're doing interviews or podcasts with another person, each voice gets recorded separately, and trust me, this makes editing way easier later on. There's also the Maono Link software where you can tweak EQ, presets, reverb, and different sound profiles without having to dig through complicated audio software. And battery life is kind of ridiculous on this thing too, up to 60 hours with RGB turned off. So if you've been looking for a hybrid microphone setup that can do wireless, USB, and XLR all in one package, definitely check out the Maono PD200W hybrid at the link in the description below. They also have a more budget-friendly option, the PD100W, that you can check out as well. Once again, a big thank you to Maono for sponsoring today's video. So we'll start here with Valve's response to the whole situation, specifically on the price point being higher than expected. I think seeing it north of $1,000 without a controller certainly had that shock and awe factor, that the sticker shock, if you will, as originally it seemed like Valve was planning to release the thing right around $750, just based on the basic math when you compare it to the jump that the Steam Deck saw with its price. Well, this is over on Steam Powered, where they have like a Q&A, as well as times that they'll have the different systems go live for orders. And right now you can join their waiting list. But if we scroll down to the bottom here, they do have a question that just asks, is this the Valve console? And Valve kind of explains their approach and the way they view this, not as a console, but as an extension of PC gaming, saying the traditional console model is to sell hardware at a loss and make up the revenue with subscription services or by selling games that are locked into the hardware. We think this can make sense for a single business in the short term, but that open ecosystems are better for customers over the long term. PC gaming history proves this. The openness of the PC gaming space has enabled it to be the primary driver of hardware and software innovation for decades. So I do think it's important to note that they are not taking on the strategy that you see from Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, to where they will sell the system at times at a loss or just subsidize it and then make up on the back end because they lock you into an ecosystem, say with PlayStation Store or Nintendo's eShop, and then the subscriptions that follow. Microsoft is an interesting one because going into this Project Helix, it seems like they want to have Windows be universal between their console and then PC space, bringing everything together. Again, that the Helix, it makes sense there, at least from the symbolism. But then it makes you wonder, will Microsoft bother subsidizing? And I feel like the answer to that, if they are taking that approach, is just no. So with that in mind, would the PlayStation 6 also be right in at this $1,000, $1,200 mark? That I don't necessarily think is going to follow suit with the Steam Machine because of the way Sony operates when it comes to their subsidizing model and locking you in. But with that in mind, we did have a look, we'll say, inside the Steam Machine. And I gotta say, when I saw this, I was scratching my head a bit because what we have here is Digital Foundry, and they seem to reach out to Valve. And I think it's just because no one was interested in ripping their Steam Machine apart down to the motherboard. Because while it's easy to open the system and change out, say, the NVMe drive, and people were taking all kinds of pictures of that because you take the back off of the Steam Machine, and then the whole thing kind of slides out of the casing, and you're left with this brick of mostly a heatsink, as they themselves say 80% or something of the volume is this massive, like, copper finned heatsink. It looks ridiculous, but the Digital Foundry managed to get some images of the motherboard sent over from Valve. And this is kind of a shame because I will say the Valve engineers there for the hardware did an awesome job with the system. It's actually quite impressive what they were able to fit into this small, they call it Pico ITX board. And so you can already kind of build small systems with an ITX setup, but like the Pico ITX is like one step below that even. And that's kind of what they did here with the Steam Machine. And some of the images, I'll just zoom in here. We can see the front and the back. Now on the left side here, we have the two chips with our CPU at the bottom there, but then we have our GPU at the top alongside of 4 memory modules, which would be the VRAM. And the comparison has basically been, oh, this is like a 7600M, which would be on different laptops. And actually, I have an image of one here we can see. And so on the right side, this is from an Alienware laptop board from Dell. And so on the right is like a Ryzen 9, but then on the left is actually the 7600M XT. And if you look at it compared to what we were seeing here with Valve's board, it's pretty similar. Like, we'd have to really zoom into the chipset and do comparisons, as Valve says that the hardware is like fully customized. But you can kind of just see the makeup of it here versus what Valve has. It's, we'll say, close enough. Still, though, Valve did make a push for a customized setup here. But the thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and other people noticed it too, on the back of the board, there's a single stick of DDR5 memory. And I looked at that and said, that's odd. You feel like you would go with 2 8GB sticks, take advantage of dual channel memory. Well, this is something that's kind of been brought into question now, as Digital Foundry mentions that, I guess, their board here that we have, a single 16GB stick, but then Gamers Nexus followed up and said theirs has 2 8GB sticks, and I assume they will be doing like a full teardown on their channel for this after that they have now completed like the standard review process that they would be doing. Quite in depth, but you probably don't want to break the system before you finish up your review. So I get all that, but apparently Valve says this has to do with them sourcing memory, and that some Steam Machine systems will just come with 1 stick and others will come with 2 8GB sticks of DDR5. And that, to me, continues to play into Valve is just not really a priority for any of these parts providers when it comes to getting RAM, for example, or even, I'll say, solid state drives. And again, if you then compare that over to someone like Sony, who is very, very familiar with this process of procuring parts, while I think the PlayStation 6 is going to be, I'll say, expensive, I don't know if we're looking at north of $1,000 like people are throwing around now after seeing the Steam Machine. I just think what we're seeing with Valve is a company who is I don't say in over their head with something like this. I mean, probably now with where we've seen prices for these different parts go, especially on the RAM side and for DRAM with storage and SSDs, but certainly inexperienced compared to Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo, right? So because of that, we're kind of seeing the results here with the Steam Machine's price point. The thing that I'm a little surprised Valve didn't do here, and they still could if they look through it and go, you know what, maybe it would be better to offer a Steam Machine without RAM and without the SSD. Now, here's the issue they run into there is the RAM, apparently, I mean, you can see here in this image, you have to break it all the way down to the board, and I'm not sure what the process is at this time, but you may have to remove the heatsink as well. I don't know if there's a back plate that just comes off and you don't have to touch the heatsink, or if this is just completely exposed when you take off maybe the bottom plate that's holding in things like your Wi-Fi board or anything like that. But it doesn't appear that getting through the RAM is like you're not removing a door and oh look, there's the RAM. Okay. So because of that, they are kind of stuck in this weird spot, but I guess it's possible they could do a little bit of re-engineering there and then sell versions of the Steam Machine that are almost bare bones setups. And we've seen that with things like Intel NUCs, where you can buy the chipset and the main board, the casing, the power supply, but you have to provide your own storage and your own RAM, and that does work to drive down the price up front. And there's some people who probably already have RAM, certainly solid-state storage that they want to use. So I do wonder if that's something that Valve will consider exploring in the future, because I will admit right now, I do think it's going to sell out. Like, I think that's going to be something that's going to sit around for long with the early adopters. But I do wonder over time if we'll just see Steam machines just kind of hanging out at Valve and they have to get kind of creative. But I saw this all pop up and I just kind of wanted to go over it here with their response and then some of the teardown here for the Steam machine. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get one of these. They're doing the whole drawing, and I'm also curious how many people are now, I guess, just less interested in the device because it starts north of $1,000. But I will say the engineering here that's kind of on display with Valve and their Steam machine has me interested at least to do a teardown and check it out a bit further, because I think they put together something really, really cool here. It's just, sadly, I think out of the price range of most people who would be interested in this, because otherwise they might go off and build their own ITX machine. And just looking around myself, falling back to something like DDR4 and maybe even older 6-core Ryzen chipset, I think it's easily doable. And in fact, you'll probably save money and it would probably come with a controller. So maybe that's something we look over in the future, building your own Steam machine, especially now that Steam OS 3.8 is like available and you can download it and load it up and it'll look just like a Steam machine will. But let me know what you think about that idea. And of course, the video here going over Valve's response and then some of the internals of the Steam machine. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.